Okay, so welcome to the Divorce Allies, the Divorce Vault Valuation Mediation live session. And I wanted to just cover some things about the divorce mediation process that could help you as you either negotiate or you start to make a settlement offer. And some of these things are going to be negotiation tips. And if you certainly have any questions, we're going to answer them because we're live on a few different platforms. But at the end of the day, part of this is about just understanding what to expect when you either go in to negotiate for mediation or if you make the offer beforehand. So most of the people that find us, hey, Emily, how are you? Are in the middle of a divorce process, right? So maybe they have a lawyer, maybe they've been fired by their lawyer, maybe they have some sort of team. So we're not advocating that you get rid of your team or you fire everyone, but we definitely want you to consider kind of revamping your strategy a little bit. And we do that in several ways. One, we have the Divorce Allies platform, which is really a community, but we also offer guides that you can download and try to get to either a settlement offer, follow the money, which is getting leverage and things that you can utilize in your negotiation, or you're putting together an offer that will get things moving. So one of the ways that we've seen is that you can utilize mediation in order to get the settlement discussed, right? So even if you make an offer and they refuse to deal with you, which somebody's already posted that they're dealing with a narcissist, and after 7 hours of mediation, they were at a complete impasse, headed to final hearing next week or next month, and they're here to listen. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think this is coming off of last week. We had this really highly toxic mediation that I think was really frustrating because we prepped in advance. This person did not actually have an attorney, but they did have a strategy in place. They had provided an offer, or we were working on an offer. So in this particular case, the other person had made an offer that was just absolutely ridiculous. And the offer entailed not only lies, but sort of contrived information. And so a lot of times the things that we will see in a negotiation that is going to keep you kind of locked in an impasse is going to be when people suggest that there's separate assets. They're going to say that they either had those assets before marriage, or they're going to, oh, this is so delightful. I love when we have fun trolls. Anyway, so when we're looking at valuing something or we're looking at going into mediation, we want to understand that you can put forth the best offer possible, but if the person is highly toxic, then they're just going to keep you involved in the process. And so in this case, they said that there were separate assets. They said that there were contributions to the house that were also separate, or gifts from various family members, but there was no proof. They also were in a state where everything was valued as of the date of separation or valued as of the date of filing. Okay, so that's an important thing to understand if you're headed into mediation, because they're going to want to value things at a certain time frame. So you're looking at coming with some information in order to create an offer. In this case, because we had a really bad offer, we wanted to counterbalance it. And so going into mediation, if there is a really bad offer sitting out there, then we want to reverse and create a position statement that's going to counterbalance the bad offer. So in this case, it was to counterbalance that the assets were separate. It was to counterbalance the fact that there was a separate contribution to the house. And then we also wanted to counterbalance that they basically lied and said that they were keeping their assets also separate. So they actually were transferring joint assets to outside accounts, but they weren't offering up the statements. And that's going to be a regular thing that you're going to see is that people will delay giving you the documents. They're going to prevent discovery, is what it's called. And this whole session is just going to be really about financial advice, not legal advice. So I'm a testifying expert and I've been testifying for over 23 years, I think now. And my background is in business valuation and providing settlement negotiations. So if you have any questions, you can certainly ask them and we'll answer them live. But at the end of the day, going into mediation, which is really one way that you can start to control the situation. So in litigation, you're not going to have as much control over the process. Certainly, if you don't have a lawyer or you're pro se or underrepresented, maybe your lawyer has fired you recently or you're in between lawyers, you're not going to have an equal footing in the legal system or the court system as you would if you're in mediation. So a lot of this is like strategically, how do you use mediation to work for you? And it's really not just going into it blind. It's not proceeding into mediation as if it's a crapshoot and like, I hope the mediator figures everything out. The mediator's role is not to actually figure things out. It's not to necessarily get you documents, and it may not even be to rationally convince the other side to do anything. The mediator is just there to be like a conduit and to go between you guys as you negotiate or you discuss some of these issues. So that means you have to come in hyper prepared and understand what's going to happen in the mediation so that you can bring a position statement. You can make sure that the position statement has some talking points that the mediator could use to kind of sell your position, sell your offer to the other side. And you want to put that in very clear terms. So if the biggest issue that you're fighting about is like the value of the house, then you want to present information that is going to showcase why your appraisal is better, why you've considered the updates that are needed in order to sell the house, or the discounts that need to be taken off the house because of volatility, because of various issues with the house. So if you don't come into the mediation with some of this already prepared, then you're walking into mediation and you're just going to have to rely upon what your spouse says to the mediator. A lot of times mediators want some sort of information. It could be 3 days beforehand, it could be several days beforehand. And they want like an overview of your case. So a lot of times lawyers, if they're involved, they're going to be writing briefs. And these briefs are really more like these long-winded stories, and they're very legal based. Whereas if you consider a position statement as really telling a story about what is best for you in the offer, then you want to frame it up so that it's a brief summary. It's like the 3 issues that are most important to you and what you want the mediator to do about it. What is your offer, right? And a lot of times we talk about how you can anchor the deal or anchor the offer before mediation. And that's going to be important if you have a lot of the information, if you've gotten complete discovery, if you've done a business valuation or an appraisal. You might make an offer far in advance, right? Like maybe even a week in advance, because you want them to go back and forth. You want them to have time to review your offer before they go into mediation. Now, there are some lawyers that are going to say, or your team are going to say, no, we don't want to give up too much information before we go into mediation. I think holding things back until trial is probably going to be part of a delay tactic, right? Like, if you hold things back, you're just going to pay everybody to position it up for trial, and then you're leaving it in a judge's hands. Mediation should almost be like mock trial, right? You're coming in. A lot of times, the mediators are former judges or they're lawyers. And so they're going to give you a perspective that somebody like an outside party is looking at your information, looking at like your situation and trying to understand what would they do if they were the judge, right? So you can ask the mediator like what they think about the position and things like that. um, Somebody asked kind of when does the clock stop, at the date of filing or when it's closer to finalizing the divorce? That is always going to be very state specific. And so it depends on your state. In some states, it rolls forward, and in some states, it absolutely stops at a certain time period. The mediation that we had was in Florida, and that's the date of separation or the date of filing. So it's going to be really important to figure out if that's what that date is in your state, because legally, a lot of times everybody wants to stop at that date. But in mediation, mediation is not a legal process. So in mediation, you're trying to argue your position. It's almost like debate in some capacities. And so, how can you bring a position statement that tells people, hey, here are the three things that we're going to argue about in mediation, and here's why I think I'm right. Now, in the position statement, it's not enough to just say like bullet points of what would be like your main issues, right? Or your main proof. It's almost like flush those out a little bit so that it could be statements that the mediator can use to take your offer over to the other side and fight for it a little bit. And that's where I think it becomes important that you understand where are the areas that you're going to argue. You're going to argue on values. You could be arguing on the date of transfer. You could be arguing on the fact that they received a bonus and that you should be receiving some of that because you're still married. You could be arguing about the fact that they say that some of the assets are separate. But whatever your positions are, you need to kind of pull those together in this summary. Because when we went into mediation and we already told them that one of the central issues was the value of the house, we explained how we got to our value. We explained with like third party data how we determined that value and how they had just come up with a number. So that's going to be pretty important. Now, when the mediator came into our room at the very beginning, and I can talk about the process of mediation, but when the mediator came in and talked to us, they didn't ask any questions about the house because um, we had already created a summary that adequately described the house. And so we didn't really care about what else was involved. And we didn't care that she wasn't asking any questions. We understood that because our summary was very complete, she didn't question any of the values. Now, she asked questions about other areas, and that's what you're paying attention to in mediation. You're not there to convince the mediator of anything. They don't have any, I guess, control over determining what happens. You're really there in your own room with your team. Your spouse is in a room with their team, and it could be a Zoom room, it could be actually in person. But a lot of times mediations are caucus style. So that means you're going to present some information to the mediator before the mediation. You want it to be something that they can read and start to understand your issues, because these divorce professionals deal with divorces every single day. Like you're just kind of a number in the process that they're seeing. So they've already seen these issues. They've already seen the infidelity or the abuse or the financial coercive control. They really don't always care about the drama of the divorce. They care about the money, the custody, the alimony, and they're trying to convince or really communicate between two parties that are having a hard time communicating a settlement offer. Even the judge, every time you go to like the court and you go to, a status conference, the judges are just saying, are you settled? What have you done to settle? Is there an outstanding offer? And so in a lot of situations, you're trying to figure out how can you convince the mediator to help convince the other side to take your position in the offer, or what is their issue with your position in the offer? And so you're drawing out information. You could also be trying to expose to your spouse's attorney, if they're really toxic, that they are dealing with somebody who is lying. They're dealing with somebody who is being evasive or confrontative or not giving you the documents. Sometimes mediation is just to gain some knowledge about the other side's position or proof. Like in some of these situations, we're saying, hey, they don't have any proof that this asset is separate. Can they present it during the mediation? Like we might have the mediator try to get documents if they're not disclosing the documents. But it's also a negotiation that if you're dealing with somebody that is somewhat rational and may not be as toxic as you want, which everybody that's going through divorce is going to be a little bit toxic. Like they don't want to get divorced, or they don't want to give up half of their money, and they don't assume that any of it's yours. So how do you get them to start to understand the reality? It's a position statement. It's a full settlement offer. It's working at putting together the offer in a spreadsheet. Like these spreadsheets are going to be really important. If there is hidden money, then you need to summarize where it went. Like in one of the cases that we just did, they said, oh, there was never any money transferred from the marital account to a separate account. There was never any money that was missing. And within 5 minutes of them saying that statement, the mediator saying that statement, we pulled up a spreadsheet that showed that there were 10, 20 different circumstances where money was moved to an account that was never disclosed, or money was withdrawn in cash that we don't know what it was utilized for. And so you're presenting enough information, and you have to find the hidden money typically in the bank statements. Like, so if they're not giving you the bank statements, or you only have like 18 months of statements, you might need 5 years, 7 years, and that's going to be done through a subpoena. So what banks do you plan on subpoenaing or putting forth to get the documents? Well, you need to know what banks they have money in. And a lot of times this could be a small business. So you need the bank accounts, you need the credit card statements, and you want to go back 5 to 7 years. And then when you're reviewing those statements, you're looking for transfers, you're looking for withdrawals, you're looking for accounts that have not been disclosed in the financial disclosure. That is what you would both file at the beginning, saying, this is all that I own. And for the most part, people have to put in that financial disclosure everything that they have, every debt, every asset, and even if it's separate, they have to list it. So what if there's tons of businesses? What if there's tons of accounts, right? They could easily say, oopsie, I forgot to list that. I'm so sorry. Let me correct that. So that's where you'll see lawyers are going to use depositions or answers to interrogatories, which are questions that they ask through the court system to get the other side to lock into the position, to lock into their answer. And so like a deposition is really your first testimony. It's not trial. You shouldn't be concerned with trial. Should be concerned with your deposition, because whatever you say in your deposition typically cannot be undone. They'll use that against you in trial. And so a lot of times, some of the tactics that we use to prep for a deposition are going to be the same things that we create when you're going into mediation. Like when you're going into mediation and people are asking you questions, or in deposition, like pause. After every question, pause for like 5 seconds, right? Give yourself time to think. Give yourself time to answer the question and think about the question. The odds are, in a deposition, they are trying to catch you. They're trying to trick you, and they're trying to see how they can do it and get a response from you. Okay. So that's where going through, like, what questions are they going to ask you? What areas are they going to think that they can get you? And thinking ahead with your team is going to be like really critical. If you have any questions, you can certainly ask them as well. So, one of the other things that we talk about a lot is anchoring the deal. So, anchoring the deal means making an offer before mediation. And it really just means making an offer as soon as possible. As soon as you have enough financial information to make the offer, you should make an offer. Even if you are not the spouse that controlled the money, even if you are not the spouse that controlled the business, right? You might want to move forward and get a business valuation, like a preliminary business valuation. Like, we offer 90-minute strategy sessions where we look at the business financials, we look at the tax returns, we try to come up with an idea of, like, what is some of the numbers that you're working with. A business valuation is based on cash flow and the risk of that cash flow continuing. So if somebody tanks their business as they're getting divorced, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth nothing. It means that you have to take a look at what historically has been the business cash flow. Now, cash flow to the business, if it's a small business, could also mean cash flow that's available for the payment of alimony or child support. So all of these things are important factors. Let's see. Somebody says that they submitted a question. Yeah, I don't see your question either, so you might need to post it again. So somebody says, in discovery, my attorney found a lot of tax and bank fraud. Will my spouse try to settle out of court? It's always a possibility, but you have to be aware that most people who are going to commit tax fraud or bank fraud probably don't care about the law. They probably don't care about the rules of divorce court either. So, yes, are you trying to utilize that? We have, in one situation, been able to get somebody to settle, but we were at trial and I was testifying to the fact that we did not use the tax returns. And we didn't use the tax returns because we thought that they were incorrect. And the other side basically said, well, how do you know they're incorrect? And I said, well, I know they're incorrect because several months ago, when we completed our analysis, because we were going to go to trial like months ago, we basically put together an analysis that was for 9 months of their operations. And that particular business owner used that 9 months analysis, like our exact number, to put on their tax return, but it was for 9 months of operations, not for 12 months of operations. And the judge was like, well, how is that possible? And I was like, I don't know, but I know that they did more work over the next 3 months. And so it's probably not right. And so that's why I didn't rely upon it. That judge ended up stopping the trial and taking the attorneys back into chambers and saying, you better settle this, because as he is a judge and works for the government, he could basically say to the IRS, who's also the government, that there's an indication of tax fraud. So that doesn't always really happen, but that is the threat that you can use to try to get them to settle. But you're also going to have to do enough forensic work to try to prove it to the court or prove it to, um, you know, the other lawyer to get your spouse to settle. A lot of times, even if they're toxic, like they're not gonna settle just based on you finding a little bit of fraud. Now, how we use bank fraud is in one way that you can get information on what somebody thinks their business is worth is you would ask for any bank loan information. Because the odds are when people go and get a bank loan, they're going to report that they have a ton of money, they have their business is worth a ton, so you kind of start to see that, and then they say, oh no, my business isn't worth that. So either you lied to the bank, you lied to the government, you lied to the IRS. And again, that would be leverage to deal with it. Somebody says I'm being starved out of receiving $2,500 a month. How do we look into dissipation of assets? So dissipation of assets is going to be how did they dissipate it? Did they just transfer it? Did they move it somewhere? I mean, we have a situation where we found $5 million of assets that have been transferred to other accounts, and we don't see that money ever came back. So that would be dissipation of assets if they sold the assets and it's now sitting in a separate bank account. So you have to try to figure out like what is your proof for the dissipation of assets? Because what a lot of times people will say is, well, I sold that asset and then I use that money to pay our bills, to give it to my spouse. And so, like then they have to prove it. And that's going to be something that you would have to look into. Absolutely. Yes, we are live and we are trying to answer questions. So my ex cashed out 400 or a 401k a couple years ago without me knowing about it, but I don't know how much he hid away from this account. Okay, so if it's a couple years ago, if it's under 7 years ago, typically you can subpoena the records directly from the bank or the financial institution. So you want to go back to wherever they had that 401k and you want to ask for the documents or ask for the records. Then you're going to see where was the money from the 401k transferred to, and then you have to go and get the subpoena, the records from that bank account or that institution. And you're going to follow, that's why we call it follow the money. So you have to basically trace it to where it goes and then keep tracing it. Or you go to them and say, look, this money transferred to an account that he did not disclose or she did not disclose, and they then need to come back and prove to you that where the money went. So that would be another way that you would figure out how much was dissipated. This person says he makes close to 800,000, and a few years ago he told me he barely makes 200,000. He's a financial advisor for a major firm. Yeah, I mean, financial advisors are going to have a lot of their money in the firm that they work in. So you would subpoena the records of their place of employment, but you would also ask for payroll records. You're going to ask for 401k information. You're going to ask for bonus information. And a lot of times people who are financial advisors are actually have their own business and they have their own, they could have their own LLC. And so you want to subpoena the records, but I would imagine if you subpoena directly from the business that they work for, then you're going to get the documents. And they don't typically like you do that. Now, I'm not giving legal advice because I'm a financial expert, but a lot of times in some states, you might have to tell the spouse that you want these documents, and if they don't provide it to you, then you go and you subpoena the records directly from their employer or the place that they're connected to as a financial advisor. Spending on sugar arrangements or outside arrangements. So again, you're going to need to summarize if somebody is spending money on outside relationships or situationships. And a lot of times that's going to be in travel. It's going to be in multiple, like we had one situation where we were looking through the bank statements and there were 2 hotel rooms booked like every single weekend that this person went out of town. And I said, the mediator is going to ask you, like, why are there 2 hotels? Like, did you calculate this right? Or is this a duplicate um, posting on your summary? And she was like, well, I don't know why he would have 2 hotel arrangements or 2 hotel rooms, but they're definitely 2 different transactions at the same hotel for the same amount of money, and they have a different portfolio number, so I know they're 2 different reservations. I said, yeah, but do you know why there would be 2 hotel rooms? And maybe you guys know, so I'm not telling you anything, but because typically when people meet online and then they meet out of town, the woman wants their own hotel room, right? They don't want to just automatically make the assumption that they're going to be sharing a hotel room. So each of those times that this person went out of town and booked 2 hotel rooms, the odds are it was a new relationship or an unknown relationship, because over time, if it's, you build an actually long-term relationship, you probably only have 1 hotel room. So just some things that you would be looking at. My ex is telling his that he works for a private company and he can only get half of his private company shares. So that's probably not true. So those are going to be like stock options or RSUs, restricted stock units, and things like this. And so you have to ask more information about that situation. So that's why you would still want to subpoena the records from the private company. And again, when you put pressure of a subpoena on a private company, they're going to get aggravated. Like they're going to put pressure back on your spouse to settle this situation, or you subpoena them for a deposition, and that's even worse. So odds are you're going to want to put some pressure on them so that you can get the real information. And even if they have a buy-sell agreement, that's not an indicator of value, right? Just because a buy-sell says that you don't get access to this or you can't transfer this, that doesn't necessarily mean anything in divorce court, because we're looking at a hypothetical willing buyer, willing seller. Like we're looking for fair market value. He's telling me that I can only get cash since the company is not of value, so I can't cash my shares and stocks. Sorry, it's just a gaslighting. So again, if he's just telling you something, but you're not seeing the documents, then I wouldn't fall for that. Married 40 years, separated for 20. Spouse said I can get only 25% of multiple marital properties. Again, that may or may not be true. So you want to see what the documents say, not just what your spouse says. And a lot of times your spouse is just going to tell you, you're not going to get this. I'm not going to give it to you. No one's going to pay you out. And I mean, you got to start realizing that a lot of it's going to be gaslighting or just telling you something to try to get you to settle, or, financially restricting you so that you're forced to settle. But if you've been married for 40 years, also being separated for 20 is also a legal issue. So you have to look at your state and maybe talk to, like even a limited scope attorney could give you some legal advice on whether that date of separation is important for the marital properties. But if you've continued to use marital money to put into marital properties or marital assets, the odds are there's a greater portion that is marital. Like by default, everybody should just be adding up everything that you have and kind of splitting it in somewhat reasonable fashion. Not everything down the middle, but you get equal amount and you get equal amount and you get different assets. So somebody said, my spouse had me sign a HELOC, but did not put me on the deed. Do I have an interest? Yeah, typically, if you've been married and you took ownership of a property during the marriage, title doesn't always matter in a divorce court situation. So just because somebody didn't put you on the title of even a bank account of any asset does not necessarily mean that you don't get interest in it. So again, Don't let them just tell you something. Do the courts care if the ex cuts you off of a household credit card and stops paying children? Yes and no. So the spouse sometimes, or the court sometimes cares. Like the best court situation that we've seen is the state of Washington right now. The state of Washington enters into um like very quickly into temporary orders. And this is actually something that we're going to be talking about tomorrow at 10 a.m. We're going to stream live from our platform called the Divorce Allies. And so you can find us online, go to our YouTube, and we're going to be talking about PDLs, which is pendente lites. We have a lawyer guest speaker that's going to be talking about these pre-hearings. So does the court care if your ex cuts you off? Sort of, not really. I mean, the hard part is like not really, because they can't do anything about it always. And so what they do is this is like a financial coercive control. Like this is financial abuse. People just don't recognize it and they don't want to speak about this term abuse. But when they cut you off, I mean, this is why a lot of times you need to get financially independent before you get divorced. Like you need to put some money aside. You need to start, getting some gift cards when you go to Target or Walmart so that you can eventually use them when you need it. You need to like put some money aside so that you can pay for some of these things. So you're literally not going to be under coercive control, because they will manipulate they will also say, I want 50-50 custody. They don't really care about having custody. They want custody so that they don't have to pay child support. But child support is not a calculation just based on 50-50 custody. It's based on income. It's based on nights with the kids. It's based on a lot of other things. Let's see right here. Can I get cash out of the private company stocks? Well, how it works is you're not going to get cash out of the stocks. He's going to keep the stocks on his side of the property statement, and you're going to get other stuff. So if the stocks are worth $100,000, then you should get $100,000 worth of something else, like equity in the house or investments or something else. It doesn't mean that anything has to be split 50-50. The same with the house. Like maybe you keep the house and he keeps his private company stocks. These buckets just have to become even. They don't have to be split down the middle. That's kind of a misnomer in how to split assets. But we talk about that in one of our downloads called How to Create a Position Statement. And we have the actual spreadsheets that we use in that situation that you can start filling out and using as the basis of your settlement offer. Like we've already created that. I think right now it goes for like $55, which like even my attorneys are like, I should never sell them for that cheap, but I don't care anymore. I just want to help the world kind of get around the court system. How did the spouse refinance the house without me knowing when my name is on the deed? Forgery. So your name could still stay on the deed. It's being refinanced in the mortgage. And how do they do it? It could have just been like with the same bank. Emily Flowers is actually our divorce mortgage lending professional. So she will be on the call tomorrow when we go live 10 a.m. Central on our YouTube platforms from the Divorce Allies. So you can also join the Divorce Allies, but if you don't have any funds to do that right now, go to our YouTubes and you can find us there as well. But like a lot of people can do a lot of things. Like people can buy property in a marriage and they're not supposed to do it. People can transfer property, they can sell property. Like don't assume the court has any police that actually police your money. Even if you get a TRO, which is like, stopping everything. I've just seen everything happen, and wealthy people don't always care about the rules, and really highly toxic narcissistic people who have money do not care. Like they're going to beg for forgiveness and just do it. And so if you have joint accounts, like you can move that money too. Like you probably should move some money before you file for divorce or tell somebody, or else they're just going to move the money and you're going to be out of luck. Okay, so let me get to this other question on YouTube. The ex is pressuring me. Okay, wait. Married 9 years, 3 joint children. Support was ordered in December. Still haven't received payments, but he's paying the ordered bills for the house, kids, and I want exclusive occupancy. Ex is pressuring me to trade my spousal support for his equity in the marital home, and I am disabled, haven't worked in 15 years, but don't get SSDI yet. Any ideas on how to deal? Um, so I don't think that you should trade spousal support for equity in the marital home unless you calculate it. And so we would calculate, like, what is the equity, what would be the spousal support payment, and what is the present value of those payments. Then if they're equal, then that makes sense. But you also probably have to figure out, like, can you get disability? Can you go on Social Security? Because if you've been married for 10 years, like, you can choose between like their Social Security or your Social Security, things like that. Let's see. We have some questions over here. Hold on. Um, he decided to buy another semi when I didn't want to, and now he's in massive debt to the company. Is that going to be my debt? Well, you're going to have to show that they got the debt on their own and they use the debt for their own purposes, right? So if they use the debt to pay like marital bills, that's going to be a harder thing to deal with. So if they use the debt to buy something for themselves, then you're just going to have to show that you didn't know about the debt, you didn't want the debt, and go about it that process. What do you suggest when he is artificially reducing income, has an LLC, and mistress has an LLC? So, a lot of times in an LLC or a business account, you're going to look at historically what is the average income. So, just because there's an influx down or up, a lot of times the courts are going to look at like a 2 or 3 year average. The only time that it was kind of wonky was when we were in the pandemic and like everything went, like, actually a lot of companies were more successful in the pandemic, but let's not go there. So for this particular thing, if they're reducing their income and they have an LLC, then you're looking at the bank account information. Sometimes, like right now, we're sitting at the year end. Odds are nobody in a divorce is going to file their tax returns on time. So that means you're going to need to look at the financials, the internal financials, or the bank statements to get an idea of what the income is, what the expenses are, and then like what his income is. And so even if he stops paying himself, it's the whole income from the business. So some of it could be to value the business, but some of it could be to for the payment of alimony and child support. So there is kind of an income component, but the courts the courts always can kind of figure out when somebody's tanking their business, or even if they like start working part-time, like the court's going to say, listen, you've worked full time in this capacity. You can't just arbitrarily decide to change it. Or was I an attorney at one time? No, I've just been a testifying expert in court for 23 years. And so I've just been around lawyers the majority of my career. And there's a lot of rules to be a testifying expert. I actually did consider becoming a lawyer a long time ago, but I chose to be on the money side because I think you have more control over the outcome. Quite frankly, most things that we argue about are money related. And so getting it settled typically is financial based. And so, but my partner is a lawyer and a CPA, and she's going to be on the call tomorrow as well when we go live at 10 a.m. Central. And again, you guys can join if you go to our YouTube tomorrow at 10 a.m. You'll see it on the Divorce Allies, or my own personal page, which is, I think, Business Valuation STL. Okay. So the debt that somebody took on went to pay your bills. No, it paid all our bills. So that's going to be a little bit harder, but what you would want to do is negotiate that they keep the debt and you get out of the debt. So you kind of want to try to walk away. I mean, in some situations, you might just be walking away with no debt, but like maybe not a lot of assets. And so that's why part of what we talk about in the Divorce Allies is how do you start making money online? And I'm just telling you, like, you guys are all talking to me online. And so there are ways that you can start offering up your services on social media, developing small websites and stand stores. But, sometimes the financial reality really stinks. And a lot of times people are manipulating the money. So you might not be able to find it all the time. Okay. Oh, the video cut out? That's too bad. Didn't realize. So my ex made W-4 dependent of 14 people, and we end up paying so much over the years. I realize he has saved money by making less tax withholding. How do I prove that? Um, I mean, I think that you're going to see that there were taxes paid in. I don't exactly, 10 a.m. Central, sorry, 10 a.m. Central, not Eastern. So I don't exactly understand your question. So you might have to reframe it and then I can put it back in there. But by making less, so like, do you owe the taxes or something like that? So a lot of times on the tax return, it's going to tell you like how much has already been paid in, or you have like a net operating loss or things like that. You can tell a lot of things from your personal tax return that people don't realize. But if you have a business, I want you to get the K1. The K1 is going to tell you whether there's distributions from the business, and the distributions are not going to necessarily be listed on your tax return unless they own a C corporation. And then you're going to have a statement on your tax return that is shareholder basis that will tell you about the distributions. How can you find if he set up a trust and is funneling money through there? So trusts typically have their own tax return as well. But if he set up a trust and he had to put assets in it or name the assets under the trust, then you would look at that. If he's funneling money through there, you have to figure out where did the money originate before you figure out where it went. Okay. So if he's making W-2 wages, then does your money come into your joint account or does it go directly to the trust? If it goes directly to the trust, then you go back to the employer and you get the payroll records. And in the payroll records, it's going to show where the money was deposited. Was it deposited into two different bank accounts? And then it's going to tell you the bank accounts. So that's typically on a payroll summary. Right now, we just hit the year end. So I would want the year end payroll summary for the past several years, and you can get that from his employer. If they're running money through a business, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated, right? How do you find crypto and Bitcoin? So, well, first of all, they typically will have like accounts with like Coinbase or some other exchange. And then, so you may have to subpoena those records. The crypto companies really make it hard to subpoena records, but there is a resource called onlysubpoenas.com. And this is a woman that works really hard to get those subpoenas returned, and she works with your lawyer to deal with it. But if they have crypto or Bitcoin, then you have to get like their key codes. And so crypto and Bitcoin are very public databases of who owns them, but it's almost like you get an address and you don't know, like if you find somebody's address, you don't know who lives at that house, right? You have to do some additional research. So if they're holding it on an exchange, you would subpoena this exchange, or you would look at, there would be transfer from money in an account to buy the Bitcoin or to buy the crypto or to be transferred to Coinbase or to be transferred to an exchange, right? So again, you're looking at where, like when you're thinking of forensics, you're trying to figure out where did the money originate and where did it start in the trail? Like how did you get paid? If you got paid in cash, that's the one way that it's harder to trace. Okay. He hid money by getting more per month, and we owe tax money where I have to borrow money from the family to get taxes paid off while he hid extra income. Okay, but when he hid the extra income, he still was paid by his clients. that money came into somewhere. And so you would look at where did it come into? The business bank accounts, your joint bank accounts, where did the money enter into, or subpoena the records from the employer, or subpoena records potentially from the clients. But that's a little instigative, and you're going to have to talk to your lawyer about that. He sold transferred money from Mexican biz and didn't provide financials. He's also saying he's out of business. Yeah, I mean, people tank their businesses and don't provide transfer or financials. But if he transferred the money, then you're looking for the bank accounts. I don't trust tax returns anyway. Like, I'm always asking for bank account information if there's any suspicion of fraud. Because again, your spouse is not a criminal. They're not hiding it from you. There's a trail in the bank accounts. You just don't, you need to get the accounts, those statements to see the trail, right? And they're probably not going to offer them to you. So I wouldn't even waste time trying to ask for those records. My spouse showed income from rental on vacant homes they owned to get a business loan. I mean, that's going to be some sort of fraud in some capacity, of course, but fraud is leverage to get it settled. So you need to put together all of the pieces of the puzzle that clearly show that they committed fraud and then present it to their attorney in settlement negotiations or with your offer or in mediation. Because even if it's illegal, these people do not care. If they did it, they don't care. They don't think they're going to get caught, and they probably won't get caught. And if you report them to the IRS and you're also listed on that tax return, like, that's going to be a problem, right? So I feel like my husband is sending our money to his loyal sister and it won't be counted in our divorce. Again, find all of the transfers, add them up in a summary, and put them over on your settlement offer as money that was depleted. Put that amount as an asset on his side. And sometimes marital waste, you're only going to get half of it back anyway. So put that money on their side, like they benefited from it, and you want the equivalent amount of assets of something else. That's how you use it in negotiation. And we talk about that in our guide to creating a settlement offer with our spreadsheets. And we show you samples of how to do that. And Follow the Money, we also show you samples of how you can summarize these things and even give you Excel templates. Like, we do everything possibly that we can in this situation. How about if you're not listed on the tax return? Yeah, go. I mean, but I think I think you want to use it as leverage to try to negotiate first. But worst case, yeah, you could report them to the IRS. But again, the IRS is going to come after your joint assets, odds are. So I would report them like afterwards, after you're done. But again, you're going to try to find where the money trail led to the assets. Okay. Let's see. What happens if he's the only one who does the accounting for the company except for year-end taxes? Again, they're going to lie to their CPA. They're going to feed their CPA whatever they want them to do. Like, everybody fluffs on their taxes. I work for a lot of small businesses and nobody's forthright. They're not concerned. They're not worried. So, I would still look at the bank statements to see, and we summarize like the deposits and see if they match the business income on the tax return. Okay, let's see. I don't know how long I've been going, but I probably have to go hang out with my family at some point. Let's see. Okay, I think we answered a lot of the questions. A lot of forensic questions because, again, most of the time somebody's going to be manipulating the money. It's a lot easier to manipulate the money if you're the small business owner, because like this person said, like, what happens if they're the only one that does the financials and then they go and give their financials to a CPA at the end of the year? Like, I have a client right now that their spouse basically said, like, to the accountant, was like, just put this on the tax return, and if anybody has to take the fall for it, I'll do it. Like, I'll go to jail. I don't care. He put that in writing, right? Do you think we're going to use it against them? Yes. Is it worth hiring a forensic accountant? Okay, let's talk about that. So we created Follow the Money so that you can do some of the work yourself. A lot of the work is getting the documents to begin with. So like getting the statements, getting the bank statements and the credit card statements. A forensic accountant is going to be limited by the data that you receive, and then they're going to go like full bore. Like you could pay $10,000, $20,000 for a forensic accountant. So it's important that when you're going to hire somebody as a forensic accountant, that you scope the project. Okay. So what does that mean? It means you need to identify a few years. So a lot of times what we're doing is kind of trying to compare like 2024 financial data to the tax return to the bank statements, 2025 financial data. So like, do you have all of the pieces of the puzzle? And a forensic accountant is going to be if you need to prove it in court. So a lot of times coming up with these summaries is going to be enough leverage for you to negotiate a settlement offer outside of court where you have a little bit more control. And so that's why we do these strategy sessions, because we're like, let's take a look. Let's see if there's anything. Like, put it together in a list. Say, look, you took $20,000, like $30,000, things like that. Like, if there was $30,000 in a joint account and he took all of it before the separation date, can I claim half of it back? Yes. But they could claim that they use that money to pay marital bills. And if that's the case, the court may not see that as depletion of assets. So what you would want to say is like, here's a summary. They move the money, and I want, in this case, if they move $30,000, then you would want $30,000 of actual cash, not just half of it, because that's you're going to force them to prove what they spent the money on. And if they didn't spend the money and it's just sitting in an account, then that's an asset, and you could get $30,000 of other assets. Okay. Let's see, any other questions? There was a question. How do you address dissipation of assets right now? My husband is spending money like crazy and I have zero visibility into anything. You got to subpoena the records. It's just a difficult process, and it's costly. And he says he used it for a lawyer's. Okay, then you should get the equivalent amount to use for your lawyers, right? What happens if they opened up a checking account and use the money? You're going to see a trail. They had to move the money, or they take it out of one account, your joint account, in a cashier's check, and you can say, where did it go? And they have to disclose every account on their financial disclosure. That's just part of the process. And so if they haven't, then they've lied to the court. And again, that should be a really bad thing, but it's not, because they could just be like, oh, I forgot. So that's why like getting a credit report from your spouse is going to be a good document to ask for. Also pulling up your credit to see if your social security number was used in some capacity without you knowing, because you're going to want to close down those accounts as well. Credit report or credit score, I'm not concerned about, but credit report is what we're looking at. What about when they're getting personal loans to claim they're broke? If they're getting personal loans, they still have to prove where did the money get transferred to and what was the use of the money. Okay, so you can't just take the money and go sit it somewhere. Then it is an asset and you would get another asset. What if we don't have a joint account? Can they move their money freely? A little bit if it's their separate asset, but if it, you're welcome. If they move it around, but the values are always the date of trial, then you're still going to have to get records. They're still going to have to provide records of where that money is being moved around. A lot of times they're going to move money around in the business accounts. Okay. So, but yes, can everybody move their money freely? Yep, they can. Attorney's fees, his are triple mine and an hourly. Okay, but you should get the equivalent amount to spend not only on attorneys, but you might have to hire expert witnesses, or vocational rehabilitation specialists or other people, forensic people. So if they're spending money on lawyers, then I would ask for an equivalent amount to spend on your side, on your team. What happens if they open checking accounts for our kids with just his name on it, transferred over 200,000 without my consent and said it was an allowance? If it's sitting in the account, they have to disclose it. That they have to disclose every account because his name is on it. And a lot of times I've seen cases where they've transferred money to kids' accounts. And if it wasn't agreed upon, then that money is still marital. Even if you put it in like a 529 or, like a college fund, if it was transferred without your agreement, it could still be a marital asset. And they're just going to be like, oh, you're going to damage the kids just for this? Yes. It's not going to damage the kids. It's going to get the money back to you where it rightfully should have been yours. But the transfer is still going to have documentation of where it originated and then where it got transferred into. And then he needs to show the statements for the account with him and his name on it. Even if you're not named on the account, because you have a litigation matter, you can subpoena records, even if it's just under their name, their social security number. That's what you would be asking the bank for. And sometimes it actually discloses that they had other accounts there that you had no idea about. Okay. All right. I think we've been going for about an hour. If you guys don't have any more questions, I think I might log off here soon. I appreciate it. Again, 10 a.m. Central tomorrow, we'll be going live on our YouTube platforms, The Divorce Allies and Business Valuation STL. We'll be talking about, I think, PDLs and hearings and different types of like the beginning divorce process. But I like that information to come from a lawyer or a previous lawyer. And then sometimes Tracy B is a pro se advocate. And so she's really helpful if you have to go and fight this yourself. And that's what a lot of our guides are for, is fighting this for yourself, doing some of the work for yourself. And if you get stuck, you can book a strategy session with me. And I think it's like 90 minutes for $500. I know it's steep, but you get so much out of it. Sometimes we even put together your offer. Like I go as far and as fast as I can in the limited amount of time. Okay, couple more questions. 529s are in his name, says he's removing my access and kids need to provide receipts to get money. Otherwise, it's 100% his to remove. The court is not going to agree. Okay. So the court is going to potentially, and again, typically the 529s are only going to have one owner. So like it's going to be you or the spouse, but you might be able to move half of the assets into another 529 at that same institution that you have control over, and he has control over half of it. Or if he transferred it without your knowledge, then I would work to pull it back into the account. Can I subpoena my kids' accounts? Oh my goodness. I have some trolls. I love them. Don't worry, I'll be blocking them right after this. Can I subpoena my kids' accounts? You can if the spouse is on there. So if you're listed or their social security is listed, if they got transferred into just their name, then like, was it a gift? How was it transferred? Things like that. Okay. Let's see. Anything else? We have a whole bunch of trolls on our YouTube, so I'm probably going to shut it down and go get rid of them. So I appreciate you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Central. And if you have any questions, you can reach out on any of our platforms. post on uh, any of our videos, and we will try to do either video responses or comments if we can answer the questions. Somebody says we own marital businesses. How can you make sure that the business evaluations are accurate? Hire somebody to review those business valuations. So I can come in and take a quick look and verify if they're accurate. So, or you can work with a joint valuator that can provide a valuation to both of you, but get a second opinion. Always, kind of review the information and don't just rely upon somebody who valued it if it looks really off, because it's really a product of cash flow, risk that the cash flow continues, and then the market. So you could book a strategy session and just show me the valuations, and I'll tell you if they're off or not. And if they're off, then you would just do a rebuttal report to say that there should be a different value. Okay, so don't worry about it. We got you covered. All right. I appreciate you guys. Where am I located? Is your template suitable for California? Yeah, the templates are suitable for any state. We actually have them being used outside of the country as well, because a lot of them are just negotiation tactics, and the template is an Excel template. And so it just gets you started. And again, for California, there's like FL like 160 and 142 and all of these forms that you have to fill out. But sometimes you can use our form to supplement it. If not, you would just transfer it to another form. But ours kind of help you balance out how to make a settlement offer. So you still might have to fill out the California forms to supply them, but definitely take a look at them. And the templates are good for negotiating. So we have a lot of cases in California right now. But if you pull it together, we can talk about some of those things. If you want to join the Divorce Allies, we'd love to have you. And we've done some prior videos about California specifically and some of their forms. So you could check that out as well. So the templates are kind of universal. Financial things are universal. So financial experts and advocates can work around the country. Your lawyer can only work in your state or your county. Okay, but we do a lot of online. I testify online. We do our strategies online. We sometimes just look at documents online. So there's a lot of ways to work with us. So reach out. Consults are only $99 for a 30-minute session. So if you have questions and you don't want to invest too much, just book a simple consult and we can get you started. All right. You guys have a good night, and I'll see you soon.